The gaslight flickered, casting long shadows across the cobblestones. The streets were eerily quiet, save for the occasional distant sound of a horse-drawn carriage, or the soft murmur of voices from behind closed doors. P.C. Thomas Smith shivered, pulling his heavy wool coat tighter against the biting wind. The chill seemed to seep into his very bones, making each step a challenge as he trudged through the night. Rain, cold and relentless, soaked his boots. The downpour had turned the cobblestones into a treacherous path, each step a potential slip. The water pooled in the uneven streets, reflecting the dim light of the gas lamps. He patrolled his beat, a labyrinth of darkened alleys and looming buildings in London's East End. Each corner he turned seemed to hide a new shadow, a new potential threat. The city's underbelly was alive with secrets and dangers. The stench of sewage and coal smoke filled the air. It was a pungent reminder of the city's industrial heart, where progress and poverty walked hand in hand. The fog mixed with the smoke, creating an almost tangible barrier. A sudden scream pierced the night, followed by the crash of breaking glass. Smith's senses went on high alert, his training kicking in as he scanned the area for the source of the disturbance. Smith gripped his truncheon, his heart pounding in his chest. The weight of his duty pressed heavily on his shoulders, but he knew he had to remain vigilant. Every sound, every movement could be a clue. He was alone, another face in the Victorian sea of shadows, tasked with keeping order in a city teetering on the edge of chaos. The night was long and the dangers were many, but Smith was determined to see it through one step at a time. Life as a Victorian police officer was far from glamorous. These men were the backbone of law and order, yet their own lives were anything but orderly. They worked long, grueling hours, often exceeding 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. Night shifts were particularly harsh, with officers patrolling dimly lit streets, often alone. Pay was meagre and barely enough to support a family. Many officers had to take on additional work just to make ends meet, further exhausting themselves. There were no pensions, no sick leave, and no holiday entitlement. If an officer fell ill or was injured, he faced the grim prospect of losing his job and income. Many officers lived in poverty, residing in cramped, squalid lodgings with their families. Their homes were often in the very neighbourhoods they patrolled, exposing them to constant danger. The constant threat of dismissal for minor infractions loomed large. A single mistake could mean the end of their career, leaving them and their families destitute. They were trapped in a cycle of poverty and hardship, their lives consumed by the relentless demands of the job. Despite their crucial role in society, Victorian police officers were often overlooked and undervalued, their sacrifices largely unrecognised. Despite their role, Victorian police officers were often met with suspicion and hostility. The public viewed them as an oppressive force, symbols of an overbearing government. They were frequently the target of verbal abuse, and physical assaults were not uncommon. The public's lack of cooperation made their already difficult job even more challenging. Solving crimes often relied on gathering information from uncooperative witnesses, many afraid or unwilling to speak to the police. Section 4. Ill-equipped and under-supported. Victorian police officers lacked the tools and support we take for granted today. Their standard-issue equipment consisted of a heavy truncheon, a whistle, and a pair of handcuffs. Firearms were rare, reserved for only the most dangerous situations. Communication was limited to shouting or using a whistle to summon help, which was often slow in arriving. They faced criminals armed with knives, clubs, and even firearms, with little more than their courage and a wooden stick for protection. Section 5. A city of shadows and peril. The Victorian city was a dangerous place, rife with poverty, crime and disease. The streets were often narrow and winding, filled with the stench of uncollected waste and the cries of the destitute. It was a time when the gap between the rich and the poor was stark, and the urban landscape reflected this harsh reality. Officers patrolled dimly lit streets where they faced the constant threat of robbery, assault and murder. The night brought with it an added layer of danger, as shadows concealed the nefarious activities of criminals. These officers were often the only line of defence against the chaos that threatened to engulf the city. They dealt with everything from petty theft and drunkenness to violent riots and gruesome murders. The variety of crimes they encountered required them to be both vigilant and versatile, ready to respond to any situation at a moment's notice. Their presence was a deterrent, but it also made them targets. The risk of injury or death was a constant companion. Many officers bore the scars of their encounters, both physical and emotional. The dangers they faced were not just from criminals, but also from the very environment they worked in, with poorly lit streets and hazardous conditions. Their work exposed them to the worst of humanity, the destitute, the desperate, and the depraved. They witnessed firsthand the effects of poverty and desperation, which often drove people to commit acts they might otherwise never consider. This exposure took a toll on their mental well-being. The life of a Victorian police officer was one of hardship, danger, and sacrifice. They worked long hours, often with little rest, and their duties were physically and mentally demanding. Despite these challenges, many were driven by a sense of duty and a desire to make their city a safer place. They faced long hours, poor pay, public hostility, and inadequate equipment. The tools they had were often outdated and insufficient for the tasks at hand. Public perception of the police was mixed, with many viewing them with suspicion or outright hostility, making their job even more challenging. Yet they continued to patrol the streets, risking their lives to maintain order in a city teetering on the brink. Their dedication was unwavering, and their presence was a beacon of hope for many. They were the unsung heroes of their time, often going above and beyond the call of duty. Their story is a stark reminder of the challenges faced by those who serve and protect, often without recognition or reward. The legacy of these officers is a testament to their bravery and commitment, and their contributions to society should not be forgotten. They laid the groundwork for modern policing, and their sacrifices continue to inspire.